Everybody keeps asking me for books. And I did mention that I could literally mention or suggest 50 books. And I know I can, and probably more. But I decided to kind of break them up. I don't know exactly how many I'm going to do. But I said, let me start with my personal top 10, the 10 books that actually change my particular life, that impacted me. It's probably, if you look at a list of people's top 10 books, I would say at least half, if not most of these books probably wouldn't be on it as far as top 10 books. But these are my personal top 10 books. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what they are. And then I'll, as I'm saying them, I'll give you a reason why they were in my top 10 and how they impacted me. And I may do, as I come to it, I'll do 11 through 20, but in groups of 10. Hopefully I can get to 50. If not, maybe 20 or 30 books that are important to me, because I think that's what you guys really want, something that's important to me and what formed me as a person. So without further ado, let's start with the first book, the very first book that really impacted me as a man or as a person. I would say started with the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Still a great book. I read it periodically. I really didn't buy movies to actually store, because normally once I see a movie, it's kind of like a worm in my head and I can't watch it more than a couple of times. But even though this was based on a real person, I even bought the movie when it came out with X. X was so important. But Malcolm X as a man, as a character, actually fascinated me. And a lot of stuff that he went through and that built him as a man, I've kind of incorporated into my being from reading the book. In no particular order, I would say Stolen Legacy as a Gnostic. Stolen Legacy as a Black Gnostic. It was my teacher's favorite book. And I even have the audio series where the lessons where he actually went through the whole book and formed my basis as far as my religious thinking, as far as being a Gnostic and being a Black Gnostic. And that is the foundation of my belief, which is rooted in Memphite theology. I would say on the conspiracy side, what got me into conspiracy and geopolitics and things like that was probably People's History of the United States. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. I can't exactly remember who wrote it. I'll put it in the description. The People's History of the United States gave an alternative view of what the United States history was. And from the poor, not from the ruler's standpoint, because normally the rulers write the history, but from the poor people's standpoint, the average Joe's standpoint. And if you read the book, it looks like a polar opposite of what the history that we've been taught. And that got me to thinking that you have to see both sides of an event to actually get the truth. And that started me to be more of a political pragmatist or a political agnostic, because what I believe in my worldview is not as important as what the truth actually is. And that's the first book that actually led me down that particular path. The second book in that same vein, since we're going in that same vein, was The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. And this was by Eustace Mullins. And when I first picked up the book and started reading it, within the first 10 pages, you're hooked. You're absolutely hooked. Because this little book gave more facts in such a dense fashion that basically you could start 100 books from The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. In fact, according to the author, this book was burned twice. They took this book off the shelves twice. The only other book that they tried to burn or destroy other than this one was Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley. But we'll get to that one later. This is basically one of the original conspiracy books. Like once you read this particular book, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, you can't look at history and newspapers the same way. So in that vein, we're going to get to Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley. Without a doubt, conspiracy, history, culture, just deep thought and how people work and how civilizations work and societies work. This has to be one of the greatest books ever written by anyone, by any American person. And I think Carroll Quigley never really got his due because that book was never supposed to be released out into the public. And I think he died trying to get not only recognition for the book, but revenge for the book, because he wrote a couple of others after that as revenge. It probably shortened his life because of it. But this was his magnum opus, almost 1,300 pages. And it probably could be 3 or 4 times the amount of that, of pages in that particular book, because it's so packed with information, the best information that Western society ever produced. And there are no errors in this particular book that I can find. Okay, next up, it's a classic book. And like I said, I'll give you the authors, because I'm reading this off the board. I'll give you the authors after in the description box. And probably as you can read it off the pictures, the images that I'm going to put up. But Caesar and Christ, one of the best civilization books that I've ever read, especially if you want to understand Western history. If you understand your laws, your medicine, your religions, all these things are descended from the Roman Empire, because we in the United States and Black folks, whether we like to think so or not, we are European. We are culturally European, whether we like it or not. And this is part of our cultural legacy. Everyone should read Caesar and Christ if you want to understand not only the Christian religion in a certain phase, but also the way your law works, the way your government works, the way you're ruled. Lots of things came from Caesar and Christ. The cycles that they went through, as far as the decline, them being saved from decline, pulled out to ultimately till they actually descended. Your form of government comes directly from the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, because in the United States, you are a representative government, just like the one Rome had. So your government is modeled directly after Rome. So that's an important book. It's another dense book that you have to get through, and you have to really dive deep and study, but it will give you such an insight and open up your worldview. Let's get to something a little bit lighter. Okay, we're going to get to the 2 science fiction books that I absolutely love, that I learned a lot from, like Dune by Frank Herbert, my absolute favorite science fiction book. I'm a science fiction nerd, but Dune has spawned so many series, like you wouldn't have Star Wars without Dune, down to the sword play, because your lightsabers are the Christ knives that came from the crystal knives that came from Worm's Tooth. Jabba the Hutt was basically an icon of Baron Harkonnen. So Dune is probably one of the most, they call it the greatest science fiction book ever written. That's arguable, but once you read it, and once you read the story of the Muad'Dib or Paul Atreides, you can't forget it. You can't put it down. It's a page turner. I read the whole series. Next one is Foundation by Isaac Asimov. If everybody knows Isaac Asimov by basically come up with the 3 laws of robotics or artificial intelligence, which is a great series. But this one was one of his first. And Foundation, like Dune, talks about a civilization, whereas Dune talks about action. Foundation talks about politics, and how politics is done in the background, and how different events shape or break a particular civilization or society. One of the absolute great books and great series by one of the great science fiction authors that's ever been produced. It's a good read. One of my top 10. Okay, coming in last, but not like quite last, but second to last, but one of the most impactful books that I've ever read, I've ever gone through. If I had to pick one book that changed my whole outlook on the world, on human beings, on history, on just about everything, has to be The Origin and Evolution of Religion, which is one of the books that I'm probably going to do a book study on. No one can actually go through this book and be unchanged. The study of this book and actually looking at the symbols and looking at what they represent and how they, like I say, propagate as people carry them from one region to another, and they change according to the region that they actually landed in. It's fascinating. It's fascinating even today. What I learned from that book, I still carry with me and I still use. And it helps me not only relate, not only to people and to other cultures, but also to the broader world, even to the broader universe, because the themes that go through it are still the same. And last but not least, it's a known book, and it was popular back in the 90s, but it's broadly overlooked. Even though Howard Bloom is one of the more popular speakers, and sometimes I think he's a bit of a racist. Not a racist, but I'm saying he's a bit of a Zionist. But his book that was new for its time. We look at the evolutionary biology now, and evolutionary psychology now, as it's something that's ordinary. Well, back then it was very, very, very new. And he was one of the first to break ground because he had to print the book himself because nobody thought it had a chance. But the Lucifer Principle was the first book on evolutionary biology and looking at archaeology and anthropology through that lens. He actually changed the way I actually look at women, because at first I didn't understand them. I knew what they did, but I didn't understand them until he started pointing out details that the feminine, a female, goes throughout all of creation, not just human beings. The archetypes of being female or feminine go all the way down to a bacteria. And like I said, it was one of those books that when you pick it up and you read it, it changes your worldview. And that's how I judge a book, whether it's written by an Asian or a white man or a black man or whatever. If I read it and I read 20 pages and it starts to change my worldview, I know I have something. But I do believe that rounds out my top 10. And like I said, look them up, look up the authors, look them up. You probably will be able to find videos on them. Give them a glance. So I know some of these probably are already on your list, but in my opinion, my humble opinion, if you give these books, any one of these books a glance, any one of these books a read, it will impact the way you view the world and the way you view yourself. And hopefully it does, this list will do as much for you as it has done for me. But like my teacher always told me, you always have to bring books to the book. No book stands alone. Each book inspires a path. Each one of these books did inspire a path that I actually took of exploration and still do today. But the list is not complete, not nearly so. But this is a good start. This is my top 10 as I see it, as my personal top 10. Give them a look, see what you think. And with that, I'll close this one out. As always, BGS out.